Hi, you've reached my extended deep dive review, and this week we are focusing on the book that is coming either this week or next. It is June 20th, 2026. I expect the book out by no later than July or August 1, August 5 at the latest for the book. The book's called Designing AI Data Centers, written by me. I'm very proud of it. I've been spending a lot of time on the concepts, and today, as part of my I don't know, whatever you want to call it, connected or joined together. What's on Scott's mind and a deep dive review. I'm going to talk about some of the concepts in the book that I think are critical. One of the things that we need to think about when we talk about an AI data center is the concept of compute. Now, compute is a multifaceted problem. The first problem, obviously, is there's more than just CPUs involved in the compute of an AI data center. You have GPUs and NPUs. So let's talk about the three components. Central processing units, most of us are aware, right? You've got one. I've got one in my watch. I have the A chipset from Apple in my Apple Watch. I have one in my iPhone. I have one in my iPad. Those chips are called central processing units. In addition to a central processing unit, there is also a graphics processing unit or GPU. Now, GPUs in the past were originally designed to support gaming on the PC world, to support typing. For me as a writer, everything I do graphically on the screen is done through the GPU or the graphics processing unit. And then I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, they started adding in a new component, which is the NPU or neural processing unit. Now, neural processing unit gives additional power to inference within an AI structure. So you can run more AI local on your machine. Not all of it has to be remote. And I'm not going to talk about some of the tools you can use, but there are a bunch of cool tools you can use that will get you to the point where you can run local. The next component is the network. And I wrote a book and it's out there called Infrastructure for Designing AI Networks. And in that book, there's a formula. And that formula is to help organizations understand the impact of traffic on their network. I've actually been working at work over the last couple of weeks on a white paper looking at traffic over time. And one of the things I've kind of discovered is that traffic has evolved in the last few years. Once upon a time, when I started out in IT, which is more than 30 years ago now, all the traffic in the enterprise was inside of the enterprise. There's very little internet traffic. In fact, at my very first IT job, I was a help desk person first, and then I became a central IT person focused on delivering the email system. Part of that process was I built the first internet connection the company had. I'd been with the company for 3 years, and this is in the early 90s, the very first internet connection the company had. In fact, it was in 1994. So right before the big explosion that became the internet, 97, 98 range. But it was the first one. The company didn't have an internet connection before that. We didn't use it. We didn't need it. And that's the shift, right? So 100% of traffic in the 60s and 70s and 80s, 100% of the traffic was in the corporate network. In the 90s, you begin to see this split where a small percentage of the traffic begins to be internet based. The rest is within the estate. The estate being the connected tissue between data centers. Now, at the end of this period, right, we begin to see an evolution further, right? Cloud brings an even bigger shift to external, and AI even more. And that reality is now the vast majority of an organization's traffic is outside of the organization. There are quite a few exceptions, of course, and we can all think of the different types of organizations that fit the exception model. But the reality is, for the majority of companies, the majority of organizations, the data that they have, the data that they move, the data in their organization has begun to move outside of what is their traditional firewalls. The next piece of this is power. And I talk talked in my What's on Scott's Mind about PUE and WUE. PUE being PUE, power usage efficiency, WUE being water usage efficiency. Both of those are measures for data centers. Power is critical, though. One of the things that worries me is all of these projected new data centers. Nobody's necessarily thinking about the impact on local power. Power is a critical thing, right? So when we think about what local power is your grid, right? And the reality of local power is that power in and of itself is critical. The reality, when you tax the reality of the grid without adding, as I talk about in What's on Scott's Mind, the mandatory solar and mandatory wind arrays for a data center, without that mandatory solar and wind array structure for the data centers, what you do is you tax the local energy world, right? The concept of a microgrid, it's an interesting concept. It actually comes out of a white paper. I was part of the team that wrote it for NIST. It is the concept of transactional energy. And within transactional energy is the concept of a microgrid. And a microgrid represents a small unit that has a power production system and a power consumption system. That is what a microgrid is. Well, every neighborhood, even if all the power is shipped in by the power company, it is effectively a microgrid. You can end up with a data center causing brownouts in areas, right? And nobody wants a brownout in the middle of the summer. Because the data center will take priority over that power. That's the deals that they set up with power companies. So power becomes a critical component. The next piece is security, and obviously physical security is critical, right? Everybody sees the data centers with the guards, gates, and guns, right? Some have bigger guns than others, but the reality of the data center world is you got to have security, and security isn't just guards, gates, and guns. Security is also the reality of cybersecurity. Next to sustainability, and I talked about that, there should be a mandatory rule. You must, when building a data center, include solar and wind power. And I mean both, not one, both. It does kind of change the impact. There also should be noise abatement rules for data centers. Data centers produce a low-level hum. The machinery itself produces a low-level hum. Humans can't hear it, but it actually is damaging to be around it over time. And you can't hear it, so you don't know what's happening. So you need to, you have to wear protective gear. That's why inside of the data center, they're all wearing headsets. They're all wearing noise-canceling headsets so that they don't get overwhelmed. All of those are the things that we need to think about. And of course, from a broad perspective, we need to have a logical, structured view of how things need to work. The book's coming. I'm so excited. My name's Scott Anderson. This is my extended review. Thank you for listening.